SSR Suguru Geto is the second featured SSR arriving with the Movie Zero events. His banner will now run at the same time as Yuta's, and he will release November 29th. He is also the second featured SSR debuffer unit after Incomplete Domain Megumi, and he has the blue type. He can dish out combined damage, so both cursed and physical technique damage, meaning both Jujutsu and Taijutsu respectively. What makes Geto strong though? First of all, he does not exactly play by the rules. He doesn't follow the traditional cursed energy mechanics and regeneration, because he can recover 20 cursed energy per turn and an extra 10 every time he defeats an enemy because of his passive. The more cursed energy he has, the more damage he can deal, and the more or the stronger debuffs he can actually apply. With his skill 1, he gets benefited with a higher chance of a critical hit. His skill 2 gains the ability to decrease the enemy damage and even increase the cursed technique damage received if Geto has over 30 and 40 cursed energy respectively. His skill 3 damages all enemies, doing greater damage with more cursed energy available, which can be very helpful in the early waves with multiple enemies. And last but not least, his ultimate, similarly to skill 3, damages all enemies, more the higher Geto's energy levels are, but reduces his energy completely after use. So you need to plan accordingly and use it for the best damage you can after applying some important debuffs as well. For example, his skill 2 maximum debuff helps his ultimate damage a lot and is also applied for 3 turns, which is a huge positive. For his skill upgrade priority, you want to focus on his skill 2, he is a debuffer at the end of the day and that is his main tool, then his ultimate, then skill 1, and then probably skill 3, but the last 2 can even be interchangeable. For his best recollection bits, Geto wants to use something for cursed energy regeneration combined with cursed technique damage boosting. Even though he can do combined damage, we want to boost his ultimate damage as much as possible, and that is the cursed technique damage, also known as Jujutsu damage, to all enemies. You can focus on one aspect of these two, so either the debuffing / utility aspect or the damage boosting aspect with your recollection bit, but overall bits for energy are preferred, because he most likely won't be your main DPS, he shouldn't, to be honest, his multipliers are not the best. You should be focusing on getting as much energy on him as possible to get the maximum out of his kit. Recollection bits for general damage boosting or combined damage boosting can also work if you have no other options available. Let's also see some specific examples. For the combination of damage boosting and energy regeneration, we have of course his own SSR recollection bit, but this is not really a super accessible option. It is the best in slot 1 though, and for a more free-to-play option, you can use the SR Cursed Nature, where Mahito and Sukuna are laughing at Yuji. For some examples of bits now that mainly help with energy regeneration and perhaps other utility, we have Imaginary Youth being a great option, the featured recollection bit that came out with Junpei, a Slight Gap, the one with Megumi and his sister in school, Hot Pot Party, and the one with Nanami in the train for an SR option as well. And as I mentioned before, if you want to specifically focus on damage boosting recollection bits without any utility, you have a plethora of options. You can just use the best ones available in your collection. For his best teams, Geto wants to be involved in 2 specific team layouts, either with 2 supports, him as the debuffer, and the DPS that deals out cursed technique or combined damage, or the team layout with 1 support, Geto himself as the debuffer, and 2 DPS units that can deal cursed technique or combined damage. In my opinion, the first option is definitely the best one for him, because other than being a debuffer, he can also help as a secondary DPS himself. For some specific team examples, I think his best team on release will be SR Yaga, Rare Yuki, because he's the only unit in the game that can help with energy regeneration, then Geto himself and Yuta. Overall, Yuta is probably the best DPS combo you can have with Geto, but in case you miss Yuta, you can use SSR Gojo in his place, and then if you miss either Yuki for some reason or Yaga, you can use SR Nanami in their place. This team is definitely worse except in quests where blue type is favorable to have, because Gojo and Geto are both blue, while Geto and Yuta have different types which can be beneficial in more quests to have more variety of damage, but if blue is the type you want to use, this team is exceptional. Even something like SR Nanami, Rare Yuki, Geto and SSR Kugisaki as your main DPS can work in case you do not have Yaga and miss both Gojo and Yuta. As far as the other team layout goes, with one support, Geto and 2 DPS units, I am not certain if you can prefer it for harder content, because having 2 supports to buff up your damage can help you a lot with damage output, but it's possible to use in simple events and quests. That would look like one main support like SR Yaga, then Geto, and then one main DPS, either SSR Gojo or Yuta, and a secondary one, for example SSR Kugisaki or Inumaki, can work. Far from optimal of course, and way more reliant on you having SR Yaga, because he's an amazing damage booster, and without the second support option, replacing him becomes much harder. Yes, you can technically use Rare Yuki, SR Nanami or some other options, but they lack the damage boosting Yaga has available, and with only him as a damage booster, you definitely will have a hard time doing consistent damage without him. If you don't have Yaga, I would definitely prefer the other layouts. And if you're free to play, I would definitely say that the super easy combo of Geto and Rare Yuki might even be a must in a lot of teams. Some other possibilities you can consider: SSR Jogo can work as a secondary DPS, even a main one as well, but we again have the blue type issue, and if you do have Gojo, he's simply better than Jogo, so just use him if you want to have 2 blue type units in your team. And for the 2 support layout team, instead of using Yaga or Nanami, you can use characters like SR Momo and Rare Inumaki, amongst others. These can be good supporting options too. And yes, in quests where you are really going to struggle with survivability, you can use a tank unit like SSR Panda or SR Miwa. These could maybe help in specific quests, but for majority of content, I think having a buffer in their place is just better. Finally, let's also talk about some obvious disadvantages this character has. A lot of players might simply not find his kit appealing. He's not the easiest character to pilot, and while he can be a strong debuffer, there are some things we simply cannot ignore. First of all, Incomplete Domain Megumi released earlier than expected and fills the debuffing role as well. Even though the characters have different kits, one with the domain expansion, the other with the energy regeneration, if you got Megumi, I would strongly advise you to skip Geto, especially if you're free to play, and save your cubes. He is coming out right after Yuta, that is another huge disadvantage. Yuta is one of the strongest characters in Phantom Parade and their banners will coexist, so if you did not get Yuta, it's better meta-wise to spend your cubes on Yuta and not on the Geto banner. Or if you spent on Yuta already, then you have no cubes for Geto anyway. Even though Yuta and Geto can even be a great combination, in the Japanese version of the game, Geto was the first featured SSR debuffer. Megumi was not released, he came out like 1.5 months after the movie Zero events, but now that we got Megumi, it was definitely not a bad decision to decide and do summons on Megumi instead of waiting for Geto. On top of that, as I mentioned before, Geto has the same type as Gojo. They can still work together, but with your two main units having the same type, you might be limited in specific unfavorable bosses for the blue type. Finally, a similar but better version of Geto, his teen version, will release later in the game's lifecycle during the half anniversary banners, so if you're a huge Geto fan, you can definitely just save your cubes and go for that version of Geto, because they have similar mechanics with the cursed energy regeneration and stuff. He's also a debuffer like this one, and to be completely honest, he's a better version of this Geto, just a different type. The future one will be green, not blue. And that concludes my full Geto guide. If you missed my Yuta one, you can click the video on the left to check that out. And if you enjoy my Phantom Parade content, let it be known by leaving a like or a comment, it would mean a lot. And as always, thank you so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.